that we'll be doing together, it's really the instructions are very, very simple. Can everybody hear me? Yes. The instructions are very, very simple. Very, very simple. I mean, obviously, I take for granted that obviously if one meditates, then of course the whole idea is to be very still, right? But the whole idea physically is to be very still and very much at ease. And in order to do that, obviously one has to sit straight. Because of course if you start going like this, one will be falling asleep. Okay? I mean, these are very obvious things. I'm sure you all know them already. But this is just for the rare individual that doesn't know it already. Okay? So when I want people to sit still and to sit straight, and when we're meditating together, I want you just to try to allow everything to be as it is. That's really all there is to it. Okay? It's really all there is to it. So it's to be very still, and to allow yourself to let everything be as it is, no matter what it is. For example, you may be struggling. You may find that you're struggling. So for example, if one is struggling, could one allow that to be as it is too? Because sometimes one is struggling. Now it'll be very difficult, you see, to meditate. Let's say you're meditating, you're sitting, and you see there's some struggle going on. Now, if you're gonna make some big effort to stop struggling, then you're not gonna be able to meditate, right? Because you're gonna be very busy with it's like trying to untie a knot, right? Is everybody with me? You understand? You'll be trying to untie a knot, you see? You'll be trying to work something out, struggle with something. And if you're doing that, it's going to be very difficult just to be still and let everything be as it is, right? Is that clear? Okay. So in the meditation that we're doing, all I want you to be able to do is to really make the effort, if necessary, to allow everything to be as it is. That means that I want everybody to resist the temptation while we're sitting quietly together to struggle, with a problem. To try and solve a particular riddle. Or to try and achieve anything particular. Do you understand? Now, the way that I teach, of course, is very much emphasizes the role of investigation, and I very much, as you'll find as the time progresses, that I very much emphasize, investigation and inquiry. And I know that's not always a difficult thing to do, that's not always an easy thing to do, especially when one is looking into questions that are delicate and that are very subtle. Some of these things are very difficult to stay with. It requires a certain amount of effort and determination and a certain kind of consistency of interest, to stay with things. Because of course we're not in the habit of looking into subtlety. You see, if we're in the habit of being in a rather gross state of consciousness and pursuing the kinds of questions that bring us and point us to a kind of subtlety, often requires a deliberate and consistent effort. And that's very much a big part of what we're going to be doing here together. But while we're meditating together, while we're sitting quietly, I just want you to allow everything to be as it is. Okay? Very easy. Theoretically, it's very easy. In practice, it's not always so easy. Interestingly enough, the more you're actually able to discover what it means to allow everything to be as it is, you'll find this whole matter of self-inquiry and investigation, will become much, much easier. You understand what I mean? Because when we're just less worried and we're less tense and we're less anxious, you see, about whether we're going to get enlightened or not, and whether we're a good person or not, or whatever it is, the mind becomes much more receptive, and we find that we become much more vulnerable and open You see, and then many things can become clear to us in quite a remarkable way, in ways in which we never anticipated or never expected. So in this practice of meditation that we're doing together, the whole point and the whole emphasis of what we're doing is simply to allow everything to be as it is. That's it. Now, to allow everything to be as it is, there's a very delicate balance that needs to be discovered, and it also needs to be practiced. And it's a delicate balance between profound relaxation, ease of being, and also unusual alertness and unusual attentiveness. So in order to let everything be as it is, see, because often when people say, people say, well, okay, I'm just let everything be as it is, and they fall asleep. Right? In life, that's what happens, right? That's often we go to sleep and there's nothing more I can do, Right? We just kind of fall asleep. And often people have trouble with meditation, as they start falling asleep also. So, to truly let everything be as it is without falling asleep, you see, with being able to sustain being very alert and very attentive and very awake and very interested, is really a delicate matter. It's a very delicate matter. And the only reason that it's a delicate matter is because for most people, their normal state of consciousness is not one such as that. Right? Normally we tend to be rather, we usually tend to abide, in states of consciousness, that are rather sloppy and unconscious. So just because we decide, okay, now I'm going to meditate and I'm going to be awake, that doesn't change anything. Because if we tend to be in a rather sloppy state of, and sleepy and a self-indulgent a state of consciousness, most of the day, just because we decide to sit still and pay attention, or whatever it is, it is not necessarily going to change that. Because basically, we are the way we are, right? I mean, why is it that so many, at this point, millions of people, look at all of you, and millions of people have been meditating for many years now, and the results seem to be rather negligible, right? Right? I mean, we read in the magazines that people, their heart rate gets slower and, better sleep and all that. But, I'm not talking about that kind of thing. So when one looks into this question about what it means really to let everything be as it is, it actually does it gets very deep very quickly if one really looks into what's implied in what that really means. So there's a balance here between leaving everything alone, letting everything be as it is. Because you see, usually if we say, leave everything alone, let it be as it is, that, right, and whatever a particular subject happens to be, that we usually lose interest in it, right? Our attention usually goes to something else. But what is it like to be able to be with something, to be able to let everything be as it is, and yet our attention not waver at all, let our attention stay with whatever it is, in this case the meditation, right? Our attention stay very much with it. You understand what I'm saying? Because usually if you let something be as it is, and your attention wanders, it goes somewhere else, because you're not busy with that anymore. You decide, let that be as it is. I don't have to worry about that, so then your attention wanders to something else. But in this, you're going to let everything be as it is, but your attention's not going to move. Your attention's going to stay right with that. You see what I'm saying? So that's why it's different. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's why the experience of meditation, the practice of meditation, and the experience of meditation is really something that's quite particular. It's very unique. So I never really used to teach meditation in this way, because often when people were spending time with me, they just began to experience meditation. I'd be sitting with people and I would be teaching, and people would just be closing their eyes and they would be having great meditation experiences. So I thought, what's a joke? I mean, then I thought, well, it's a joke teaching people how to meditate formally. You know, I'm going to be imprisoning people. They have to experience it naturally. That's a real meditation, that kind of thing. But when I had more, after more time passed, I started realizing that there's really more to it than all that. There's more to it than all that. And so now I'm teaching it formally, and also the other thing still happens. Okay. Oh, anyway, when I became a lot more interested, though, in really, being willing to spend a lot of time teaching meditation formally, was when I realized, I only realized it when I started to teach it, because otherwise I didn't really think about it, was that the experience of meditation and the practice of meditation, if it's being practiced in the right way, is not in any way different than the state of enlightenment. And when that really began to become obvious to me, then I thought, well, this is something very good. This is actually something very good. You understand what I'm saying? When one really understands it, when one really, really deeply understands what it's all about, when one really understands what it means to make no effort. To make no effort means to relax and let everything be as it is. When someone deeply, deeply, deeply understands that in the core of their being, you see? And at the same time, when one understands what it means to be awake, to be alert, to be attentive, to be truly sensitive, you see? To not miss anything that's important, to be that awake, to be truly conscious, you see? So when I started seeing that, when you put those two things together, that's what the experience of meditation is, real meditation. And when meditation is practiced correctly, that's what happens. And of course, that's no different than the state of enlightenment itself. To be so deeply at ease, and so to be so deeply relaxed within one's being, you see, within one's true self, that in a deepest sense, this profound struggle with existence, you see, has come to an end. So that means that one is deeply, deeply at rest, deeply, deeply at ease. You see, and all the attention that has been given to the struggle and trying to overcome some kind of problem or difficulty, all the attention has been liberated, and one finds one is naturally awake, and one is naturally very deeply attentive and deeply alert. And so there's a natural awakeness, or a natural alertness, a natural attentiveness. That's why when one meets wise people, when one meets a truly wise person, not someone who just learned from reading or studying, even though that's very good too, but people who are truly wise people, they have this intuitive, deep and profound wisdom, say, well, where does that come from? How do they know these things? And one finds that they know these things because their attention has been liberated from this struggle to overcome and to become, and because they found this, and they found this deep rest because they're not struggling anymore, and then the attention becomes very liberated. Instead of being concerned with a problem of one kind or another, when our attention becomes liberated from that, and the problem, of course, usually is ourself, our ego, or our fascination with our own personality and our own personal history and the future and all the rest of it. And when the attention becomes liberated from all that, then the attention starts to expand. The attention, it seems like it actually starts to expand. So one suddenly finds that one's awareness seems to grow. Of course, it's not really growing. It's just that instead of being focused on some little itty-bitty problem, you see, it's not focused on that problem anymore. Right? And then as a result of it, the attention becomes liberated. And so then naturally as a result of that, the person's able to see much, much more than they were able to see before, and they're able to know much more than they were able to know before. But the reason why is really very simple. You understand? So the practice of sitting quietly and letting everything be as it is, and at the same time remaining alert and attentive, is a good thing to do. It's not necessarily the most important thing that any of us could be doing if we want to be free or enlightened in this life. It's not necessarily the most important thing, but it's a good thing to do. It's a very good thing to do. It's a very wholesome thing to do. And I think that the practice of meditation and the experience of meditation become truly interesting. Become interesting in a way that we become more interested in more than just the meditation experience itself, but become truly interesting to us when we begin to recognize and discover for ourselves that this kind of experience, if understood correctly, is not separate from the state of enlightenment itself. And when we begin to really understand that and recognize that for ourselves in a way that's truly deep, then this whole business of meditation actually becomes very interesting for us. It becomes very, very interesting, very, very fascinating, right? So it's very interesting to really look into how this all works and what it has to do with really being free. Because of course the whole point is to be free as we are, is to be awake as we are, is to be relaxed and at ease in being who we are, just simply as a human being, right? Not as a meditator, right? But the point is just to be a human being who is awake, who's awake and who's conscious and who's alert and who's sensitive, and who doesn't miss things that are important, and someone who's deeply at ease, deeply comfortable in being who they are and in being alive right now, deeply, deeply comfortable in being alive as oneself right now. So that's obviously what the goal is. It's one way to understand what part of the goal is, right? So we're just understanding meditation. It's just simply a small part of that, but it's an important part. Is that clear? Isn't this much more interesting than just hearing some kind of meditation technique? Follow your breath. Concentrate on this. Right? Anyway, it is to me. Maybe it's not to you. So maybe we can sit quietly for a short time tonight, and then we'll meet again tomorrow morning, and we'll pursue this for a while as a way to begin the retreat. So the investigation into this question of letting everything be as it is really, as I said at the beginning, and I don't know if many of you remember that, but as I said at the very beginning, it's the very foundation of what liberation is all about. And if one does not have a very deep and profound grasp of what letting everything be as it is actually means, there's not going to be any kind of liberation, no matter what happens to you. All kind of things can happen to someone. Someone can have all kinds of experiences and understand all kinds of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be any liberation. So unless there's a very deep and profound understanding of what this actually means, then there's not going to be any liberation. If there's no liberation, then what's the point? That's in terms of the way I look at it anyway. So I just want to really go into this again, and I'm probably going to be saying many things that I've already said before, but it really doesn't matter. So the point of letting everything be as it is, that what I'm actually pointing everybody to is to the ground of being itself, is to where we end up and to what's there when there's no motion and there's no movement and there's no action and there's no doing, right? When there's no notion of any sense of a self as being separate, right? When there's no notion of self and other, self and world. When there's no notion of time, right? There's only that, and what it is, we really don't know what it is. Nobody really knows what it is. I don't know what it is. We don't have to know, what it is, in the sense of being able to describe it as an object. All we have to do is to be able to recognize it for what it is, which is where everything came from and where everything goes back to. It's the very ground of being. It's the very ground of everything. And it's the ground of who and what each and every one of us is. and you keep going back and you keep going back and you keep going back, that's it. That's where you arrive. And when you arrive there, there isn't anything there, but at the same time, you're not dead. So it's a very mysterious matter. It's a very mysterious matter, and I can't really speak much about it because there's not much to say about it. You just have to find out about it for yourself. But it's through the discovery of this ground, or this ultimate source of who we are, this ground of being, this source, of who and what each and every one of us is, that if liberation is to mean anything, or if it does mean anything, that's what we have to discover. And when we discover that, we also have to in some way or another recognize that to be what it is, the ground and the source of who and what we are. Unless we're able to do this, we are going to continuously make the mistake of believing that we are other than that. Which means believing we are what we think, believing we are what we feel, and all the rest of it. And we'll continue to suffer and act in foolish and mad and crazy ways like most people do. So, the only way to be truly free in this world, is by discovering that and recognizing that, is to be the very source of really who and what one is. Without being very deeply grounded in this kind of discovery, also it's going to be very difficult to be able to see things as they are. It's going to be very difficult to see clearly. Because we're always going to be taken away by... We're always going to be taken away from the truth of who and what we are by thoughts and by feelings and by experiences that we have in life. And we're always, that means that even if we have known it, even if we have known it for a short time, or even if we have known it for some time, because we're not rooted there, and because we've not truly allowed ourselves to sink into that and to die into that, we're going to be getting lost again and again, in the world of appearances. We're going to keep on making the mistake of believing that things that aren't real are real, that things that aren't important are not important are important. And of course, as I'm sure you all know, the most fundamental distraction and the biggest thing that, the biggest mistake that everybody makes in terms of their list of priorities is believing that their ideas about themselves are more important than the ultimate truth of who they really are. It's very simple. I'm sure you've all heard it many times, but unless you really know it, it doesn't make any difference how many times you've heard it. So because so few people seem to really know this, and because so few people are really grounded in this, the world is in the way that it is. It's a mess. And there's very little trust in this world, and there's very little love in this world. And the degree of selfish and self-centered behavior in this world is appalling, and it's brought, it's even bringing the whole planet to its knees. So it's a very serious thing. So one way to understand what the point of all this is, how to be, a fully human being. How to be a fully human being. Who's not, who's not living in isolation, who's not just living in a cave somewhere in silent meditation. But how to be a fully human being who's living very much immersed in the world of relationships and responsibilities and all the rest of it. And not to get lost in all that. Not to get continuously lost. Because the minute we get lost, we're going to make mistakes. And what I mean by making a mistake is we're going to act out of ignorance. When we act out of ignorance, it means that we recognize something as being real, that's unreal, and we respond to it. And then there's a result. There's a result that there's an effect. So if we... you understand what I'm saying? So, unless we know what the truth is, and unless we're deeply grounded in that truth, then we will continuously make mistakes that will be the very expression of everything that's wrong with this world. We will be creating, with just about everyone else, the miserable mess that so much of this human world is. Whether we like it or not, and whether we believe we are or we're not, because either we are or we're not. There's really not much of a middle ground. You know, I mean, you have really bad offenders, the Hitlers and so on of the world, and then, you know, and there's the lesser offenders, and on it goes. But basically, either we're participating in it or we're not. And if we want to be free and if we want to be liberated, the idea and the goal is not to participate in it at all, not to be part of it. That's what it means to be a liberated human being. Because not only is a liberated human being not a part of it, but they're the very expression, they're a living expression of the fact that it's possible to be the opposite of all that. As a fully human being who's very much immersed in this world of time and space, thought and feeling, all the rest of it. So the key, the key to being able to be truly free and liberated in this world is only by being deeply grounded in that, in the truth. The truth, and the truth here being the discovery of who and what we really are, at the source of our being, and not betraying that fact in our relationship to life, in our relationship to thought, to feeling, to self and other, and to the world, not betraying that fact. And that's really what it's all about. That's what all spiritual practice is all about, and that's what all spiritual experience, in the way I understand it, is supposed to lead us to. If it doesn't lead to that, then it's not really that significant. Often it just becomes an end in itself. There's some event happens and it's quite wonderful, but it doesn't lead to anything, so therefore it doesn't make much difference. So if it doesn't make any difference, then who cares? Well, the person, maybe the individual, but it doesn't matter. So looking into this question of letting everything be as it is, and continuing to look into this question of letting everything be as it is, and continuing to look into this question of letting everything be as it is to help each and every one of you to recognize, to see and experience, and to understand more and more deeply what I'm talking about. If you let everything be as it is, if you truly understand it, what I was saying, a lot of you, I know it's challenging. I know what I'm saying in terms of the instructions that I've given you in relationship to this question of letting everything be as it is very challenging, and it is very difficult also because it's so absolute by nature. So because we're not in the habit of looking at our experience in a way that's absolute, it's difficult to stay with it for more than a few moments. Maybe we can get it for a few moments and it becomes very clear, very obvious, very simple. But then, because it's not in our habit to see that way, then we, due to habit, we just fall back into a habitual way of perceiving our experience, and then when we think about letting everything be, it is, oh yeah, I got to relax more, something like that, or I have to, let this be as it is, and let that be as it is, and then of course it's forgotten. The radical implications of what I've been speaking about, of course, then are forgotten, and I understand why. And the reason is simply because we're not in the habit of looking at our experience in that way. But through letting everything be as it is, through truly looking into what that means, we will, if we truly look into it, we will be forced to go beyond this dualistic relationship to all of our experience. Which means I want this, I don't want that, this is good and this is bad. That person is doing better than I am. I'm doing better than the other one. Except all that kind of thing. So if we really look into what it means to let everything be as it is, and then we allow ourselves to really sink into letting everything be as it is, and we continue to allow everything to be as it is, slowly but surely, and maybe very quickly, all these kind of distinctions begin to fade out. Because if you let truly everything be as it is, including, like some of you were talking about, I was feeling this pain, and then I didn't know if I should move or not, and then I moved, or you didn't. From the point of view of letting everything be as it is, it's all the same. If you really understand it, it really is all the same. So in letting everything, in looking, in continuing to look into this question of letting everything be as it is, this motivation to make certain distinctions that's fundamentally motivated by a need to see ourselves as being separate begins to fade away. So once again, if we truly allow ourselves to sink very deeply into this notion of letting everything be as it is, that which you see, there's a couple of different reasons of why human beings, there's different reasons why human beings make distinctions. But one of the most insidious, but some of them are very good, very noble and very important, and we'll talk about those later on in the retreat. But one of the most powerful reasons that people make distinctions, one of the most insidious reasons that people make distinctions is out of this need to protect this notion of a sense as being somehow separate from and superior to the other. And this is the fundamental illness, I think, that the human race is plagued with, at least in the way that I see it. And it's a disease that is rampant, and most people are infected with it. So on one hand, of course, we make a distinction between, a large cup and a small cup because we want the large cup, not the small cup, or we want the tea and not the coffee, or whatever it is. I'm not really speaking about that kind of thing, though. I'm speaking about how and why, you see, we make distinctions. And what motivates many human beings to make the kind of distinctions that they do has to do with this compulsive and fear-ridden and very aggressive impulse to see oneself as being separate. You understand what I mean? Separate means somehow better. Somehow better. And as long as this impulse is alive within us, and as long as it's running our life, and in most people it does run their life. It's not just a nasty habit that someone needs to tighten up on. It literally runs. It's hard to recognize. You have to look very deeply into yourself to recognize the truth of what I'm saying. I don't ask any of you to accept it just because that it's true, just because I'm saying it. But I just tell you that if you look deeply enough, you probably will see that this is true. This kind of this habit actually literally runs people's life. That means it literally is what motivates us to be how we are, to be the kind of person that we are, to be who we are, and to do what we do the way we do it. That's what ego is. That's what ego is. It's just a complete. It's a big shadow that just covers the whole being, and it's ugly. Always only ugly and dark, insidious. There's nothing positive about it in relationship to this question of liberation. There's no positive qualities whatsoever. And looking very deeply into this question, and this idea of letting everything be as it is, and letting everything be as it is, and also letting that be as it is, and also letting even that, and also all that, and 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 all that, to be as it is, then this habit, this horrific and life, inhibiting, just unthinkably destructive habit to locate oneself always, you see, begins to fade away. Because this is it. We always need to locate ourselves. What does that have to do with me? Where am I? What does that have to do with me? Where am I? You see, all of this kind of thing. But if we're letting everything be as it is, and this kind of thing, if you truly do it, if you're truly taking it very seriously and allowing it to really go very deep, then all of that whole movement, you see, begins to get quieter and quieter. Because then what begins to happen is that you just simply begin to discover there's something else, that everything being as it is, and it begins to get very interesting and even intoxicating when one stops to struggle against it. Because at first it's letting everything be, letting everything be as it is. Okay. Then the person says okay, and then they start doing this. But, and then they start getting agitated, and then it's gone. They lost it. Probably won't be able to get back to it for a day or whatever, 2 days. They try again. Oh, now that must have been what he meant. And then it's something else. And then, see, in the minute you go with the but, it doesn't matter how small. It could be this small. It could be very big, of course. But even if it's very, very small, you're out of it. You lost it. Because I'm speaking about something that is subtlety itself. I mean, I don't know how else I can really say it. It is the essence of what subtlety is. There are no buts in this. There are no buts whatsoever. So, but if we can allow ourselves, if we can stay with it, and if we can not, if we are unwilling to allow ourselves to be carried away by the buts, if we're unwilling to entertain them, then we will begin to get captivated by this. It will begin to captivate us, this letting everything be as it is, because then suddenly it will begin to attract us. Well, the whole thing, what it actually is, and what it is, as I'm saying to you, I can't really explain what it is. You'll know for yourself when you begin to discover it. Then you start to getting captivated by it. What it is, you don't really know. But you know it's captivating you. And in light of that, nothing else matters. Because you see, in that there's everything. Everything. All contentment, all peace, all joy. No sense of being separate, inadequate, inferior, superior, better than, less than. There's no notion of that anything, that nothing ever happened, nothing ever began, nothing ever finished. It's kind of like this, and you just captivated at that, and you get more captivated by it, and more until that's it. That's all there is. That's what you see, and that's what purification was. One way to understand what purification is about is then this takes a lot of courage then, though, because in spite of all the how pleasant it can be or how joyful, there's the fear. There's the fear of death, or what's called ego death. There's a fear of dissolution, which is a fear of losing control, which is a fear of losing touch with the sense of being separate. So if we're used to living and being all the time with the sense of ourself as being separate, that this is how we relate to the world. And this is the only way we know how to navigate in the world of time and space. So without that, we were speaking a little bit about this yesterday in the afternoon. This tremendous fear and insecurity, in spite of how attractive it is, in spite of how pleasant or even ecstatic it can be, or it is, there's still this conscious recognition that I'm going to die. That I'm going to die. Hopefully. But that's just another but, isn't it? That's just another but. Even fear then, and all the preoccupation with, but what am I getting, this kind of thing. It's all just another but. And it's another but, it's another excuse. But if we can just let ourselves go, then this is the real purification. Because then you have to let yourself stay there and remain there and stay there and remain there, and still stay there and remain there and stay there and remain there and stay there and remain there until all the impulses, you see, all the impulses to move away from that burn away. You have to stay there that long until all the impulses, you see, to move away from that, to be separate again, no longer arise. At that point, you see, then you're free. And at a point like that, then the world is not a problem for you anymore. Because you have stepped over, you have let go of the world, and you've let go of this idea of being separate, and you're no longer invested in being separate. Because you've given over your life and your heart to something else. So that's all finished. So only because it's all finished is the world not a problem, is the mind not a problem, feelings not a problem, all the rest of it. The other is not a problem, time's not a problem. But only then will it really not be a problem. Only then will the individual be a fully human being who's free, you see, free in this life. See, why? Only because they've let go of it, and they stopped insisting on needing to hold on to that which is separate, that which is ultimately false, wrong, untrue. You see, that which is separate. I want to be separate. I have to be separate. I want to be separate. I have to be separate. I am different, better. I am. I have to be. If I'm not, well, I don't know if I could take that. It's too unbearable for me. All that kind of thing. So we have to be willing to take this question very deeply, very consistently for a long period of time, in order to really burn, to burn away. That's what the purification is. It's very good, and I know in my own teaching I stress a lot about the need to understand. The need to understand that it's very important to contemplate the nature of what it means to be a human being who's awake and who's free in this miserable world. But ultimately, you see, the investigation and the practice of contemplation about the nature of what it means to be a free human being in a miserable world won't take us very far if we haven't really given over our life and our relationship to life to the source, you see, of who and what we really are. So when there's no time and there's no thought and all the rest of it. Otherwise, we're always going to be looking for an angle, we're always going to be looking for some way that we can get something for ourselves, you see. Even out of profound spiritual contemplation, we're going to be looking for some way, you see, to get through it. Some gimmick. Those are all gimmicks. We're going to be making it all a gimmick, because somehow we're still going to be our fundamental strategy, you see, in relationship to life, to our own life, is going to be to survive. Just how we are. Thank you very much. And the practice of contemplation and deep investigation into the nature of what it means to be a free human being in a miserable world will simply be an expression, of what Trungpa Rinpoche called spiritual materialism, unless we have no doubt that we want to go all the way, that we want to die, that we're willing to really die for this. Because you see, only if we really want to die for this, willing to die for it, ready to die for it, and recognize that it's the only way to succeed, truly, is our relationship to this kind of investigation, this kind of contemplation going to be pure. Then our motivation will be pure, you see, because then we're just interested in really finding out, well, how do things really fit together? How does this all work? Why are things the way they are? Why am I the way I am? What is the relationship between thought and feeling? What is the relationship between self and other? What is the relationship between self and world? What is ignorance? What is truth? What's the expression of ignorance? What's the expression of truth? What is love? What's the relationship between love and truth? And on it goes, this kind of thing. These are all very interesting questions for any human being that's, not insane and that has some degree of sensitivity and interest, in what it means to be alive. But it's not going to lead to anything if our fundamental motivation is to get something for ourselves, to accumulate more information. To become a better person, a stronger person, or whatever it is, whatever kind of self-centered motivation they could be. But when this kind of investigation and contemplation is fueled by the sincere willingness to die for the truth, then it's something very different. It's very powerful. Very powerful, you see, because then it really means everything to us. Because then we recognize that, well, if I don't become very clear about this, I don't find a way to become very clear about this, well, then I'm going to make a mess of it. I'm going to be trampling all over myself. I'll be trampling all over everyone I run into. I'll be living in a world of illusion. So looking into this question of letting everything be as it is is the foundation for everything else. Without going very deeply into this idea of letting everything be as it is, and letting everything be as it is, and letting everything be as it is, and letting everything be as it is, nothing else is going to be that useful. But the letting everything be as it is the hardest part. It's the hardest part of all this. It's the most demanding. It is the most demanding part of all this. That's why I'm spending so much time on it, and why I'm insisting that all of you continue to look very deeply into what this means. Because it's the most important part of everything else. There's a lot more to this, of course, but without really going very deeply into this, the rest of it's not going to be standing on a very firm foundation. It'll just be more information. You just we'll go back home with a lot more information. It might be very thrilling for a while, but sooner or later, it's going to fall apart. You understand what I mean? So just to go a little bit longer on this point, and again I've said this before, I'm just saying it again in slightly different words, that it's possible, you see, to experience for oneself, for a certain period of time, for an extraordinary moment, or an extraordinary few hours, or even a couple of days, what it means to let everything be as it is. Just like floating through life, through time, in amazement. It's so amazing. The person's just amazed. I can't believe it. Look how different everything is. When I get out of the way, when I stop struggling, when I stop insisting, and all the rest of it, and demanding, when I stop worrying about myself, it's extraordinary. You know? The thing is that this habit, you see this habit that we don't know when it began. Nobody knows when it started. Nobody knows why or how. So since nobody knows, I can tell you I don't know, but the only thing I'm sure about is that's not important. As this habit, you see, of this need to be separate, to see oneself as being separate, you see, and to position ourselves in relationship to all our experience in such a way, you see, that will facilitate this need, you see, this habit and this need, you see. This doesn't die so easily. That we can experience how wonderful it is that everything is as it is, and that we're not struggling against that, that we are temporarily, so what it usually is, temporarily not struggling against that. Temporarily we are surrendering or have surrendered to that absolute fact. Everything is as it is. I'm allowing everything to be as it is, etc. Then it's marvelous. And boy, we recognize how marvelous it is, because the difference is the difference between day and night. But when we're speaking about what it means to truly be free, what liberation is all about, is that means that that habit to see ourselves as being separate and to position ourselves in relationship to all our experience in order to facilitate that need, dies. That means it does not resurface. You can see under the weight or the pressure or the enormity of the splendor, you see, of spiritual revelation, this habit, which is ego, the force of ego, it just can like sink under the surface, just there. You can sometimes you can see like the water, the beautiful ocean. You can't see anything, and then you're just sitting there, and like you suddenly look, oh my God, I didn't see that. It just was right under there, but you didn't see it. Because you just saw the whole beautiful object, there was nothing there. And then when you actually start to look closer, oh my God, it's right under the surface. Very dangerous, this kind of thing. So just because at certain times, especially times when we feel very in touch with ourselves and in touch with the truth with a capital T, because we don't feel or not aware of the presence of this insidious tendency, habit, which is ego, because it doesn't mean that it has been destroyed. It just means that usually means that we're giving so much attention to something else that we have stopped giving, and as a result of giving so much attention to something else, to the experience of revelation, to depth, etc., that we cease to give this our attention. That's why it begins to sink down there. So I just want everybody to understand that what liberation is when this sinks to the bottom and disappears. And that in order to be free from that insidious habit, which is the most destructive force in the human world, it's so destructive that it may kill us all in our own lifetime. It's possible. That for liberation really to mean anything, that has to be destroyed. And that's really what this is all about. So I want you to all understand the kind of depth, and the kind of depth that's required for all this. Not only of experience, of course there needs to be extraordinary depth of experience that's very necessary to be able to sustain this kind of movement. But what's also equally necessary has to do with a very deep and very profoundly heartfelt recognition of what it is that this is all about. Because so often when people get involved with this, they get so distracted by their own experiences, pleasant or unpleasant, extraordinary or mundane, that they lose touch with the enormity of the significance of what this endeavor really is all about, which is the destruction of evil. I really mean that. And the destruction of that which is, bringing the whole planet to its knees, that which exists within ourselves. Because the hardest thing is for the individual to keep their own, wherever they are in their own personal evolution, in context. You see, in the context of evolution as a whole. It's the most difficult thing. So often if we're having an extraordinary, wonderful time, we lose touch with the implications of what that has to do with the whole. And also, in the same way, of course, when we're having a difficult time, we become equally self-centered. And of course, when we become self-centered, basically what it means to be self-centered is that only thing you care about is yourself. That means one loses touch with the heart. It has to be a heartfelt recognition of what this is really all about and what it has to do with the whole race. It's the most difficult thing, and it's also with my own students. It's the hardest thing for them to remember, that it's not really about you or how you feel today or how good it is or how bad it is. It's about something much bigger than that. It's the hardest thing for people to remember. And I also feel that unless we find a way to be deeply grounded in letting everything be as it is, we're not going to be able to sustain that kind of heartfelt relationship to being in touch with the enormity, of what we're all involved with. So when I say what we're all involved with, of course I'm not only referring to just because all of you have come to be with me on this retreat here, but I mean all of us, all the billions of human beings that are alive on this planet. So if we, once again, looking back at this question of everything, letting everything be as it is, it's like a doorway. It's a doorway into the unknown. And if you can allow yourself to go through that door, right, forever, well, then maybe that's too much. Maybe it's too much to ask. But if you can allow yourself to go through that door again and again and again and again, you'll find that you're going to begin to feel more comfortable with a perspective that's that big. And that's how you start to, it's in a way, and part of it's almost like a re-education we're almost re-educating ourselves. Because then we begin to become, because at first it's either thrilling and frightening, or thrilling or frightening, or whatever it is. But then after you find, when it's not so, so frightening anymore, and when it's something that you actually recognize, and you begin to feel more comfortable there. And you have to begin to feel comfortable there in order to open your eyes and look around. And only if your eyes are open and you look, because it's thrilling and frightening, your eyes aren't open. But when your eyes are open and you're able to look around, then you actually can begin to see where you are and and where you are, and you might discover and if you can do that long enough, you'll be able to recognize, oh, I see, I was in hell before, and that this is heaven. Because heaven, of course, the difference between heaven and hell, of course, only has to do with the point of view. It's a perspective. It's not a physical location in time and space that's up or down, left or right, in or out or anywhere else. The difference between heaven and hell has to do with the perspective that we have on our experience. It has to do with the way we perceive things. So this is why, as I was saying, it's something we need to experience and discover over and over and over again, so that we begin to feel comfortable with that kind of the experience of that kind of depth. To a degree, we can really begin to feel, as I said, comfortable and at ease with that degree of vastness. And so we can experience again and again what it's like to know that without being afraid, and without just getting carried away. It's okay to get carried away, but still, not just getting carried away. And then we begin to see for ourselves what the difference is between heaven and hell, and why that is heaven and why the other is hell. We begin to see then, how and why, we're just mechanically drawn in one direction in a sleep state. We begin to see how it doesn't make sense, and that we don't want it, and it's insane. And we begin to recognize for ourselves what does make perfect and absolute sense. You see, we begin to see what the solution to everything is. And it's all found, essentially in this simple notion of letting everything be as it is. It's through the door to which we just can discover everything. Okay?